a doctor. TARDIS, that's time and relative dimension in space.
Run! There's an old Earth saying, a phrase of great power and wisdom, and consolation to the soul in times of need. Allons-y!
What will we see?
Stuff of legend.
You're the most wonderful man, and I don't want you to die.
I don't want to go. It's not the time that matters, it's the person.
Hello everybody, and welcome to my latest Doctor Who video. Today I'm going to be discussing, in my own opinion, what I think the best modern era of the show is. Now, what does that mean exactly, you might ask? Well, I'm going to be going through all of the 9th Doctor episodes, all of the 10th Doctor, all the 11th Doctor, and all the 12th Doctor episodes. That's series 1 through 10, but I think I'm going to rate each episode on 3 different categories. That's good, average, and bad. Now, if you really want to try and assign numbers to this, I suppose you could say that a bad episode might be a 1 to 4, average being 5 to 6, and a good episode being 7 to 10. So, without further ado, let's get into this and jump right in with Series 1. Alright, it might seem like I'm going to be really rushing through this video, but honestly, there's a lot to talk about, and this is my 4th time trying to go over just this series alone, and I've gone on for like 20 minutes just on this one series, so I cannot talk about each episode in depth. Maybe I will in future videos on some of these episodes, but for now, I'm really just going to be assigning them their ratings and moving on with the occasional anecdote on how I feel about some of them. Rose, good episode, really great introduction to the show. Episode 2, The End of the World, really good as well. Episode 3, they're all really strong episodes, these first 3. They really show the range that this show has to offer. It was really smart for them to start in the modern day, go to the future, then the past, because you're getting basically the basics of what this show can do. And it's really just anything your imagination could put on screen, and the BBC's budget, of course. This formula, this modern episode introduction to the 2nd episode being set in the future, and the 3rd episode being set in the past, this is a formula that the show has used many different times since then, most recently in Series 10, and in Series 10, it still proves 10 series later, this is a formula that just works. Don't ask me why, other than my reasoning of it really encapsulating everything this show can do, but it just works. Episode 4 now, maybe just average in my opinion. Yeah, episode 4 and 5, the first 2-parter in this series, Aliens of London and World War III. This story will really be, I think, more special to people who watched it when they were younger, because in my opinion, the Slitheen are just, they're just too childlike kitty stuff. They had some cool scenes and moments, but farting aliens, just their look, some people might have thought they were scary when they were younger, and that's understandable, but me watching this while I was in high school, I didn't really like this episode. I liked basically everything about it except for the villains, but the villains are really ingrained into this story, so for me it just falls as average because of them. Yeah, they're just not my villains. But of course, who are my villains? The Daleks. I love the Daleks. Well, they're not exactly my favorite villains, but I do love them. Dalek is one of the best episodes this show has ever produced. It's the best Dalek episode the modern series has ever produced, actually. It is just so great. It's really, I can't stress enough that I really want to talk about each episode in depth, but I just can't for the sake of time. If any of you in the comments later want to ask me about maybe my more specific thoughts on episodes that I thought were good or bad, you can do that and I'll gladly respond, because I have a lot to say about pretty much every story here. Dalek is just amazing. We then get to the long game. The series is already half over at this point, and I really enjoyed the long game. I think the writing of this series really surpasses a lot of maybe some flaws that we might, encounter in some episodes, but most of the episodes just really work. It's hard to really say. This series is just really strong. because now we move on to Father's Day, one of the most relatable episodes the show has ever made. I'm gonna sound like a broken record on a lot of these things, but Rose Tyler, this is probably one of her best episodes in the show because it really made her become more of a well-rounded character and a relatable character to the audience. This is an episode where I think anyone could put themselves in Rose's shoes. I think this story, though it might be predictable on rewatch, it's really not about that. It's more about just this scenario and how Rose reacts to it, how the Doctor reacts to it, and of course, how Rose's father reacts to it. It's just a really emotional story, and one that I think does really good work with the characters that it has. We move on, of course, to Stephen Moffat's first contribution to the modern series of Doctor Who, with an amazing two-parter, The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances. This is one of the Ninth Doctor's most brilliant stories ever. I never found it to be that scary. It might just be because, as I said, I started watching this show while I was still in high school, so some of the things didn't scare me as much as some other things, or maybe it just wasn't my type of episode for that. I find that this episode really holds up in every other department other than being scary. I don't find it that scary. Of course, I do find some episodes of Doctor Who scary, even at my age, which is good. I like that. But this episode for me really holds up. It's very well written and very well focused. And for a two-parter, its pacing is really good. I think it's one of the best paced two-parters ever. I'm going to move on to Boomtown now. It's an episode that I just think is unnecessary, and there's a reason I think that the series ended up dropping the 13 episodes and moved on to 12 episodes, and this is a prime example of just an unneeded episode. It focuses on a character that didn't need any more focusing on. I think her name was Margaret the Slitheen. She really didn't need any more expanding on, in my opinion. I think it was just, I don't want to say waste of time, but it was an uninteresting time for me nonetheless. The good part of this episode is that it does a lot of good development of its characters. Not just Margaret, but the Doctor, Rose, Mickey, everyone. It's just not my type of episode. I usually like character-based stories, but this one just felt really just lackluster to me. Moving on now to the finale, Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways. Man, this might be one of the best finales the show has ever done. The Bad Wolf Arc really handled well in this story. Having a predestination paradox as your arc in Doctor Who works really well. I want to say more, but I can't. But the Daleks were brought back, and this is the most threatening the Daleks were since Dalek, obviously, because it was the last time they appeared, but of course, they start to go on a bit of a downturn after this episode in terms of their overall threat. But at this point in Series 1, the Daleks are amazing, a formidable force for the Doctor. And talking about the Bad Wolf arc already, we get an amazing scene with the Ninth Doctor and different scenes with Rose showing how far they've come in just this one series. So much happens in this one series. And that's why it's so special, because so much happens in the series and so much of it is so good, and that's why it's so strong. This finale just rounds off the series perfectly, and I think it was really smart to do the regeneration in the finale. I think it's just a perfect introductory series. This is a series, I don't care what anyone says, it gets everything about it into a nice 13 episodes, including regeneration at the very end. It's a beautiful series. So, overall, Series 1 had 10 good episodes, 2 average episodes, and 1 bad episode with a really good story arc. This is a very special series to me, and one of my favorites. But now on to Series 2. Series 2 is a bit of an odd series for me. I like it in a lot of moments, and I don't in a lot of others. I just think the main thing that weighs this series down is the relationship between the Doctor and Rose. I think it was way better written in Series 1, and Rose and Ten just does not work for me. I don't like their romantic relationship. I don't like any romantic relationship between a companion and a Doctor. I don't think it works at all, but that's just my opinion. I know other people like this relationship, but I don't. And the fact that it's just so heavily ingrained into this series will take away from the quality of my enjoyment of it in terms of some of the episodes, of course, because the series is really focused on that relationship. New Earth I think it's a bad starting point for the series. I don't even know if there's another episode 1 in any of these series that I find to be bad, but this is one that I do, and that's solely because I think it's the boomtown, actually, of series 2. It just focuses on a character that doesn't need to be focused on, that we've already met before, similar to the villainous Margaret. This is about the villainous Cassandra, who I think didn't need any more development. The fact that they chose this series in the premiere to focus on this character when we're supposed to be introducing this new dynamic between the Doctor and Rose and going on a new adventure, and it does do that, fair enough. It does introduce the new dynamic. It does bring out a new adventure. I just don't like this episode. I think the strongest parts is the stuff with the cat nurses and stuff like that. I don't remember if they have an official name other than cat nurses, cat people. But I like that stuff. I like some of the ideas in New Earth, but I don't like Ten and Rose in this. Ten is fine, obviously, by himself. I love the 10th Doctor, but him and Rose as a doctor and a companion, I just don't like. And it takes away from a lot of the episodes in this series for me. So overall, I just don't like this episode. Tooth and Claw is just very average to me because I just don't feel that it's that memorable. I like the ideas of bringing fantasy or mythological elements into a sci-fi show, and I think it really works, and the setting is really good. It has some really good atmosphere, but honestly, I feel that the plot can get a bit repetitive. I remember a lot of just running around the mansion, being chased by a werewolf, a CGI werewolf, which actually does hold up quite well, but I just don't find this episode to be that outstanding. I think it's just an average adventure, but that doesn't mean it's bad. I just find it to be average. School Reunion, I think, is a very strong story, more so because of the characters in it. I love the villain. He's great. The CGI of the creatures themselves obviously does not hold up quite well, but I don't like to judge stories based on their special effects. I feel that special effects are just a way to enhance a story rather than be what keeps that story held up over time. Obviously, the CGI is going to be a bit outdated, but that doesn't take away from my enjoyment of the episode. I think it's really good. The only negative I can think about this is, and again, it's a theme in Series 2, I think Rose Tyler is not a very good character in this series overall. I think they made her very two-dimensional. She was a really strong character in the first series, and I don't know why they made the decision to just turn her into, in my opinion, a whiny love interest for the 10th Doctor, and that's really all she was, and she was really, really bad in School Reunion in a lot of moments, but it did kind of redeem itself in the end, obviously. Her whole arc over this one episode is just getting used to Sarah Jane and dealing with the fact that the Doctor has had other people, or should I say in her eyes, women in his life before her. And that's hard for her to kind of deal with. But in a way, I guess it might be relatable, but I just don't find that an appealing personality trait. And though that might make her a more real person, I don't like it. And it's something that I didn't really enjoy having in School Reunion, even though she ended up finally making nice with Sarah Jane in the end, which was, that was good. Obviously, also, K9 was in it, and K9 was awesome. Yeah, School Reunion. I love it. The Girl in the Fireplace next. This is one of my favorite episodes by Stephen Moffat ever. I think he was the first writer in the new series of Doctor Who to find a way to merge the past and the future into one story. Usually up to this point we've only had this episode they go to the past, this episode they go to the future, but in this episode we kind of bounce back and forth. And eventually Moffat kind of gets into the habit of bouncing a little too much between story elements, and that gets a bit confusing sometimes, I think, for a lot of the audience. But in this episode it's proof of how he can do it really well, and this episode just has a lot going for it. We go from Madame de Pompadour in Paris to the SS Madame de Pompadour on a spaceship in the far future with killer clockwork robots. It's a really fun story. I think it grasps the whole range of emotions in Doctor Who. It's really funny, it's really emotional, it's got some good scares and some good action. It's just got a lot going for it, and I just love The Girl in the Fireplace. It's a really nice story. Next, we finally get introduced to the Cybermen in Series 2, and this is a really weird story for me. I remember on first watch not liking it too much, even though this was my first introduction to the Cybermen ever. I think they're okay in this story. This is an okay Cybermen story. It's not a great Cybermen story, but I would say it's okay. As you can see, though, I have given it a good rating, even though I think just because the Cybermen were not great in it doesn't mean the story itself wasn't good. The fact that it was the first story in a parallel universe was really cool. It really opened up the show just a bit more to what it can do and where it can go. And a lot of just the writing was good. The characters I enjoyed. Mickey was really good in it, who I haven't even mentioned. He was also really good in School Reunion and The Girl in the Fireplace and a lot of other episodes. I really enjoyed him traveling with the Doctor and Rose because it took focus off of Ten and Rose's romantic relationship, which is really good. The Idiot's Lantern. I think this episode gets a little too much hate just for the villain itself. Yes, the television lady, I can't remember her name. It's literally on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember her name. The Wire, there we go. The Wire is a bit hammy, but I think she needed to be. Like, her performance is intentionally kind of cheesy because it's that time period that they're in. And yeah, I actually like this story a lot, but it doesn't have a lot going for it. It is just an average story. It's not great or anything. On to episode 8 now. The Impossible Planet. There's a lot to say about it. We get introduced to the Ood, and that's like the least interesting thing. There's so many interesting things in this story. This was like the first episode in the new series where the Doctor kind of feels like he's out of his element a lot more than usual, where he doesn't exactly know everything that's going on, and a lot of this is kind of baffling to him. There's just so much going on in the story. The characters are really good. It's a really strong and intense story. And this was the first episode of Doctor Who that actually scared me. But yeah, I really love The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. And I know I've kind of gone on a bit of a rant, but I will do that about some of the episodes I feel very strongly about, good and bad. Like Love and Monsters, episode 10. I'm actually kidding. I don't feel that strong about this story. I think it has some interesting ideas and concepts that were just not executed well. The idea of having a creature that I think was inspired by some kid's drawing or something. The Absorbaloff, it's a really stupid creature. It's hammy. This whole episode can be described as cringy beyond belief. It's just kind of messy and stupid. Similar to Fear Her. I don't like Fear Her. Not because a lot of other people also hate Fear Her. I don't just hate on episodes because other people hate them. I do have my own opinions on it. Like I said, some interesting ideas. Not something I really care for, though. And I think what really weighs the story down is the performances in it. The child actor is really bad. She's not good. She's just really... I don't know how to describe her, but she's just not good in this story. And it's just not... It's a memorable one because I think this was coming off of Love and Monsters, and then you get Fear Her, and you're like, oh my god, this series is really going downhill, because before that you had The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. So you have The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit, and then you have Love and Monsters, Fear Her, sandwiched between the finale. Maybe if they were put in a different spot, they might have been more well received. Personally, I don't think so. I think they're just bad stories on their own. But let's move on to the finale. I think Army of Ghosts and Doomsday, though, is incredibly overrated by a lot of people. I think all based off of nostalgia, but that's just me. The Daleks and the Cybermen are cool, and it's a really amazing moment when they meet on screen, I believe, for the first time in all of Doctor Who history. That's really interesting. But the Cybermen were handled really stupidly in this story, but I'll get to that. I gotta backtrack a bit. The Torchwood Arc. I think this arc is just plain boring. I don't like it at all. This arc is handled exactly the same way as it was in Series 1, which some people might think, oh, it worked for Series 1, it'll work for Series 2. I don't think so. You can do that once. You can place a word throughout every episode and have that continually pop up. And that worked as the Series 1 arc. It was simple enough, and it was good. It was interesting. Torchwood is not an interesting arc to me. I think is the most boring arc of all the new series of Doctor Who. I don't know why exactly. It is just bland, and it is just a repeat of the Bad Wolf formula, just in a slightly different way. The Doctor's activity in Tooth and Claw is kind of what spawns Torchwood to come into being, and even though Torchwood ended up being a really good spin-off show, it in Doctor Who in this finale I find to be really just stupid. I don't like it. It's interesting to have an organization specifically created to sort of fight the Doctor, even though they don't really. Torchwood is just boring to me. I don't like the Ark, and I don't like the Cybermen as just robots that shoot and delete. It kind of was okay in the two-parter earlier in the series, because they were still doing other things with the Cybermen, but them just being robots to fight the Daleks, while interesting, they need to be more than that and actually have a better purpose in the story and hold their own more against the Daleks. Doomsday, I think the main thing I need to talk about is the ending of Ten and Roses, or the supposed ending of their relationship. I think it's tragic and it worked, but I really don't like the beach scene as much as other people. I like it in the sense of two best friends being separated forever, and that would have been a really good scene where they give their goodbyes. And I like a lot of the non-romantic dialogue that they have. And their acting, of course, I can't fault their acting. They give great performances, Billy Piper and David Tennant. But it gets a little too soppy with the I love you and the 10th Doctor getting cut off before he could say I love you. I don't like that at all. It's not that bad to me. That's why this story is only average. But like I said, I think it's an overrated finale with a bad story arc over the whole series. But overall, it's an okay series. It's fine. The only thing that really hampers it down is a few bad episodes and the Doctor-companion relationship. Wow, I'm not really going that fast through these series like I planned. I got a lot to talk about. Alright, moving on. But before we do, the story arc was bad. It had 6 good episodes, 4 average episodes, and 3 bad episodes. It's an okay series, Series 2. But now it's time to move on to Series 3. Now, Series 3 is definitely an improvement on Series 2, in my opinion. It starts with an average, I would say, couple episodes. Episodes 1 and 2 sort of follow a slightly tweaked formula from Series 1, where they start, of course, in modern day, but instead of going straight to the future, they go to the time of Shakespeare. And then we go to Gridlock, which is the future, which is also in New Earth, or New Earth. I don't know if I got all the news in there. I don't know why I didn't do that stupid bit earlier in Series 2, but I find Smith & Jones to be very competent. It does a great job at introducing Martha Jones, and it's a fun little adventure, but it's just average to me. The Shakespearean Code is also just average to me. I like going to historical places and meeting some historical figures, but I like The Unquiet Dead a lot more than the Shakespeare Code, so it's just average to me. Gridlock, I think it's a really underrated story, actually. Upon rewatch, I really like it. I know on initial viewing I didn't find it to be that special, but it really is to me now. It's just a fun little futuristic story, and I enjoy it a lot. It gets pretty dark towards the end, which doesn't make a story good, but for this, unlike Love and Monsters, it has this kind of whimsical, fun, future adventure tone throughout it. So overall, I really like Gridlock. It's a cool story. Daleks in Manhattan and Evolution of the Daleks is probably the first episode really where I think, at least for me, the Daleks started to lose steam. They kind of lost that energy in their stories. They didn't feel as much of a threat in this one as they usually did, and the idea of Dalek-sec is kind of interesting. It's a new way to approach the Daleks, I think. It kind of dealt with some new things, but it just wasn't that interesting, and I find it just be an average two-parter at best. It has some things that I like and some things that I don't like in it. The Lazarus Experiment is a bad episode. It has its moments, mainly in the end, but it's a really weird end because the episode ends at like the 30-minute mark, but then it doesn't. It's just really jarring and odd. And I don't know why the writer of this episode decided to do that, though those last 15 minutes are the best of the episode. It's still not a very good story. I think it's just bad, but it's not that bad. I think it's more close to average than bad, but I'm still going to rate it as bad just because I don't feel like giving it that average, even though I would say it's close. 42 is another story that I think gets a lot of unnecessary hate, similar to Gridlock. I like 42 a lot. I think it's a really cool story. I mentioned earlier in Series 2, I like stories where I get firsts. Like, this is different. This is something I haven't really experienced in the new series. And what that is for 42 is I generally felt like the Doctor was really helpless in this story a lot of the time. And some people might say it's a gimmick to have the little, 42 minutes, it's a story in real time. Oh, that's a real gimmick. It's a cool one-off idea, and I think it really worked and helped build tension in this episode. But like I said, the thing I remember most about this story is feeling like the 10th Doctor and Martha were in legitimate danger. We had never really seen the Doctor so vulnerable up until this point. And similar to in Series 2 with the Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit, in that two-parter in Series 2, I'd never really seen him get so out of his element and not really having all the answers. That was really cool. And in 42, he doesn't really have control of the situation. He's in a lot of danger here, and we don't exactly feel safe. We get to the point where he's about to explain regeneration to Martha, which was a really cool moment. I really loved that moment. It really hammered home how much he thought he was going to die, and it really added to the drama. Now, some might say that the characters were bland. I thought they were pretty good. For a one-off story, I thought they were on par with two-part story characters, which usually get more development. I thought they were pretty good for a one-off story. The villain itself, I think, is really overlooked. I think 42 is a good story. That's all I have to say on that. On to Human Nature and the Family of Blood, which I think is a story that many people love in the community of Doctor Who. I know some people that don't enjoy it as much. I don't personally like it a lot, but I think it's definitely a good story. I really like the dynamic between Martha and the 10th Doctor here. It's just great. It's a really cool idea. And I know it's adapted from a 7th Doctor novel. I believe that's what I've heard. But it's still really cool to see this idea put into the show. And it really works with the 10th Doctor here. And like I said, the relationship between 10 and Martha is really interesting in this episode. And you really feel for Martha here. Similar to how you kind of felt for Rose in Series 1 and Father's Day, you kind of feel like you want to root for Martha in this story a lot more than others. And overall, it's just a really strong two-parter. It deals with a lot of new interesting concepts, like the Doctor being human, and dealing with John Smith and how he wants to stay human. He doesn't want to become this Time Lord again. He doesn't want to deal with that. And it has a lot of emotional moments and shows David Tennant's range in this role very well. He can act. This guy can act. And I know all the Doctors have been pretty good actors, but this was a really good showcase of the 10th Doctor's ability to get those ranges of emotion. Overall, it was a really good story, and I haven't even talked about the Family of Blood themselves. They were cool villains. I liked them a lot. It's a cool story. Blink. I think it's overrated, but I still think it's good. This is the third outing of Stephen Moffat, Series 3. And I think it's definitely up there as one of his best. But I don't think it's that good. I don't think it's one of the best stories in the show's history. I think it's one of the most different and creative stories in the show's history. That doesn't make it my favorite, though. I know it will be to others, but it's not my favorite. And that mainly comes down to if you're a fan of the Weeping Angels or not, if you find them scary. Stories work better for people, scary ones, if you're actually scared by them. I don't find Blink to be a scary episode. I don't find the Weeping Angels to be that scary at all. I've found them scary a couple of times, but not very much in Blink. I'm not a jump scare person. I do not like jump scares, not because I think they're too scary. I just think they're not scary. I think jump scares are very cheap attempts at trying to get people to, whoa, freak out about something that's supposed to be scary on the screen, but it's usually not. I'm a person that gets scared more by something slow, some build-up, rather than just, something jumping in your face. And the Weeping Angels being the epitome of a jump scare was never going to make me scared of them, ever. It doesn't make me, hate them or anything. I still like the creatures. They're a really cool idea. Like I said, Blink is a very creative and cool episode. It's a Dr. Light episode that is really good, and that doesn't happen a lot. Utopia, The Sound of Drums, The Last of the Time Lords. This is how you do a three-parter. This is a really good finale. At the time of watching Series 3 for the first time, I didn't really have an idea of what happened in the classic series. So the reveal of the Master was not as big to me as it would have been if I knew who it was. But it's a credit to how good the buildup of this story is to that moment that it still got me really pumped and excited and scared and really just, oh my gosh. I like the idea of the future kind. I really like the setting, even though it goes a little too far going to the end of the universe. I know that this was really the first time that they've done this, but they've done it a little too much to the point where it's not as interesting as it was in Utopia. But I think Utopia is a good story on its own. The Sound of Drums and The Last of the Time Lords. There's not much to say about these stories that haven't been said by other people, but let me just talk to you about the arc real quick. I think it's good. And you might think that I'm being contradictory to what I said earlier about Series 2 and the Torchwood Arc. However, the difference between this and the Torchwood Arc, yes, though it is doing the Bad Wolf formula over again, yes, it works, but this is way more interesting than Torchwood, in my opinion. And it's as simple as that. I like this arc because it's just more interesting than Torchwood. And I think it has a little more weight and build up to it than the Torchwood arc. Just, oh, and then here's Torchwood. We've been talking about Torchwood. We've heard the random word Torchwood, seemingly for no reason, actually, because it's not really like, they had an explanation for why Bad Wolf was there, but they didn't have one for Torchwood. And for Harold Saxon, it makes sense because people were mentioning his name because he was relevant in those modern era stories, because he was actually the prime minister at that time, or getting voted in to be prime minister. So yeah, I like the Saxon arc a lot. I think it comes full circle really well, and just a really enjoyable arc. The Last of the Time Lords is a great conclusion to the three-parter. It's a great title for the three-parter. It's a great showdown between the Master and the Doctor. Episodes 7 through 13 are all good. It's a really strong series. It has a bit of a bumpy start, but it's a really strong second half to a series. And overall, I really like Series 3. I barely even talked about the character of Martha Jones. She was a great companion. I like her development. I think the 10th Doctor did not treat her very well, and that kind of took away from his character in the series, but he was definitely better than he was in Series 2, and I like the 10th Doctor here, regardless, even if he was in a Rose hangover, which, like I said, my main problem with the 10th Doctor is Rose, who never truly goes away throughout his tenure, even though they got separated in different realities. So overall, Series 3 has a good story arc with 8 good episodes, 4 average episodes, and 1 bad episode. This is the middle chapter of the 10th Doctor's era, and we're now moving on to Series 4, his final series. Series 4 is a very strong series. It has a bumpy start, but not to say that it's a really bad start either. I think Partners in Crime, The Fires of Pompeii are both average. They're fine, competent stories. I don't like the little fat creatures in episode 1. I think The Fires of Pompeii is only more relevant now because of the actors that are in it, not because of the story itself. The final 12 minutes, amazing. I love The Fires of Pompeii for its last couple minutes. It's great. But leading up to that, I find that I'm just watching it for the last 12 minutes anyway. Planet of the Ood, I like it. I think it has a lot of interesting stuff in it, but like I said, I'm going to try and go a little faster now. The Sontaran Stratagem, The Poison Sky. It brought the Sontarans back into the new series. I think it did it pretty well. I'm just not quite a fan of this two-parter as much as other people. I like the Sontarans, they're cool. I think this story kind of wasted the return of Martha Jones by just having her be a duplicate most of the time. But I found the story to still be enjoyable anyways. Donna Noble is one of my favorite companions. And I hated her when I first watched it. I hated her when I first watched Series 4. I was like, oh my gosh, she's so annoying. I can't stand her. But it's a testament to how good her character arc is that I love her so much by the end, and that I can watch it back and think, what the hell was I thinking? She's a blast. She's an amazing companion. This is the relationship between the Doctor and a companion that I absolutely love. They're just best friends. They just want to have a great time throughout time and space. And Donna Noble goes through a great character arc throughout her time on the show. It's amazing. I'm getting off track again, but I'm sorry I had to talk about Donna. She's amazing. The Doctor's Daughter. I know some people don't like it. I like it a lot, actually. I find that it's kind of a cool, interesting, different story. Even though some people say it's a bit rushed and the Hath and their deal with the humans was a bit underwritten, or maybe predictable, or maybe a little too overstuffed into the story. There was a lot going on. But I overall actually enjoy this story a lot. So let's move on. We're on to the second half of Series 4, and we're on to The Unicorn and the Wasp, which I just find is an average story. Now on to Silence in the Library, Forest of the Dead, Stephen Moffat's two-parter in Series 4. I like it a lot. It's really cool. Vashti Narada, great villain. Overall, it's a great story. It has a nice little introduction to River Song, and I think this is her best story that she's in. But I don't hate this character. I think she's fine, and I really like her in this two-parter. She's mysterious, and a really interesting idea to have for the Doctor, to have someone from his future that knows all about him and knows all about his future, but he doesn't know her yet. And I think this story, even without that, would hold up so well. This two-parter has so much in it, so much to talk about, so many good things. I love this two-parter. Stephen Moffat, you continued to be the strongest writer of the RTD era. Well done. Now on to one of my favorite stories of the 10th Doctor ever, Midnight. Midnight to me, I don't want to say that it's underrated because I hear a lot of people talking a lot of praise about it. But it's just such a good story. I love Midnight so much. This is probably the scariest episode of Doctor Who I've ever watched. Enough's been said about Midnight. I could go on and on and on and just rant about this story as well as many others, but I love Midnight. Midnight is one of my favorite stories ever. Turn Left. I'm running out of breath here. Turn Left is great. I love Turn Left. It's a really bleak story, but this is definitely the culmination of Donna Noble's arc as a character. She's really good in this story, and I really love Turn Left. It's great. You know what it deals with. You've heard everyone talk about these stories. I just really like Turn Left. It's cool. It's nice. It's a good story. We finally get to the Stolen Earth and Journey's End. Now I flip-flopped on this two-parter. At first I thought Journey's End might end up being average, just because it is a bit of a cluster. Some people, I think, believe that RTD handled all these characters very well and gave them all a lot of screen time, and he did for the most part. But I thought some of the characters were a bit underused, and it was a bit crowded. The story was very crowded. And though it kind of worked, I think the story worked. But overall, this is a really cool story. I don't like Rose Tyler at all in it. I think it's stupid. You know my opinions on Rose and 10. She never left. She was always there in the back of the 10th Doctor's mind, constantly referencing her, except the fact that just when we thought he finally moved on for her, she comes back at the end of the series. Yes, I know a lot of people like it. I don't like her. I like her in Series 1. I love her a lot in Series 1, but I don't like her with 10. Of course, the conclusion is infamous for being a couple buttons pressed and the Daleks start spinning around. And this was the moment where people finally decided, okay, the Daleks are becoming a joke. And it's true, they did start to become a joke at this point. The thing that lifted this story, though, for the Daleks was the fact that they were doing a full-on invasion of Earth in this new series of Doctor Who. Full-on invasion, led by Davros, with Davros returning in this story, which, oh my god, he was amazing in this story. But I think he's better in another one that I'm going to talk about later. But Stolen Earth, Journey's End, great finale. I think the arc of this series overall is average. I like it. It does still follow a very similar formula. Planets are disappearing, and then we have the Dr. Donna. But it's a lot simpler than that. Also, I guess you can include Rose as something that kind of popped up here and there. It's got a couple things going on, this arc. It's not exactly pinpoint on one thing. Of course, the worst part about it is the Dr. Donna. It's just a weird prophecy that... It's kind of an unneeded prophecy, actually. It's just unneeded. You could have just had the disappearing planets and Rose popping up, and it still would have worked fine. You didn't really need the Dr. Donna to be an arc that had to be set up. It could have just happened in the finale and been a one-off weird thing. But on a positive note, Series 4 is a great series. But I think the main reason might be is that if you look at my list here, and a lot of people will agree, there's not a single bad episode of Series 4. There is no bad episode. There's no flat-out episode that you can say, oh, that was just blech. That was unenjoyable. I didn't like anything in that episode. It was bad. No, Series 4 is a really good series. It has some average ones in there, and some people might defend some of those and say, no, they're definitely good stories, not average ones. And it's fair enough. It's your opinion. But I think overall the series is remembered so fondly because it's just so strong. It doesn't have a blemish that you can be like, oh, I remember that in Series 4. Most series you can be like, yeah, it was good, but remember that? That was bad, but you don't have that in this, and that's why I think Series 4 is loved so much by so many people, including myself. I think it's one of the best series of the show. Oh my gosh. I might die, I might pass out, and we're only at Series 4. Oh my gosh. Overall, story arc, it was average, as I said, but 0 bad episodes in the series, 8 good, 5 average. It's an incredibly strong series with one of the best Doctor-companion relationships to date. I love Series 4. Now let's look back at these first 4 series of Doctor Who. Headed by Russell T Davies, this was the end of his tenure as head writer. And he had a really strong 4-series run. Of course, I'm going to get to the specials and the Christmas specials I haven't even talked about. I'm going to leave those for later. He had a really strong 4-series run with 2 very good Doctors and largely well-received companions. But now we've entered the Stephen Moffat era.
Remember, every black day I ever stopped you, I have seen things you wouldn't believe. I have lost things you will never understand. If you want my life, come and get it!
You know who I am? I'm the Doctor. The man that stops the monsters. They all lost. Burned and ran. I am what stands between you and them. That's who I am.